You drink?
No, thanks, I'm cool.
I'm not offering. I'm asking you if you drink. You think I give alcohol to teenage drivers taking my daughter out?
Hey, man, the protective vibe, I dig.
What's with you, kid? You think the death of Sammy Davis left an opening in the Rat Pack?
Welcome back to the Growing Up Punk podcast, a podcast about punk rock and all of its friends. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. We've got another awesome interview for you, which we will get to in a few minutes. But before that, we would love to share about how you can further connect with us. If you go to our website at Growing Punk Pod, you will find links to our YouTube, which we post reviews and talking about records and different things like that. So you can go and check that out. And there's also links to our social media where we love to chat with you guys, answer questions, all that good stuff. We also have a group chat through Discord, which you can connect with us on there as well. And we also have a Patreon page if you like what we're doing and want extra bonus not footage, but, well, I guess there is some footage, but interviews and reviews, blogs, all that kind of stuff, then please go and check that out and sign up. That would help us greatly. We really appreciate any support that we get from you guys. Thanks so much for being a part of this community. We love getting to know you guys and talk about all of our favorite bands. So, yeah, let's keep that going. Today we have an interview with Stu Ross. I originally met Stu... it was probably 2007. The band I was playing in was touring with Misery Signals, and so we got to spend a month together on the road, and it was awesome. We made lots of good memories, and so it was cool to reconnect, to kind of talk about those days, that era, that time of music. So we kind of get into how he joined Misery Signals, and even before that, how he got into music. What were some of his favorite memories with Misery Signals? We also touch on their new album, which is awesome, called Ultraviolet. You can go check that out on all your favorite streaming sites. And then we talk about kind of how he transitioned from Misery Signals into Comeback Kid and what that was like. What were some of the differences in songwriting and touring and just kind of gelling with a whole new group of guys and kind of how that all plays out. So yeah, we talk about lots of other stuff too, and then we finish by discussing his top 3 favorite punk records. So if you like hearing about the music that influenced your favorite musicians, then stick around to the end, as that's a really good way to end the conversation and talk about some albums that were not only influential on him, but many others as well. That's enough for me for now. Thank you for listening, and here is my interview with Stu Ross. So you mentioned this week that you were jamming with Living with Lions. Is that... I didn't know if you were still with those guys, or what's been going on with that?
Well, I mean, those guys are my best buddies at home. So, like Chase and Lauren as well, both playing Comeback Kid.
Right.
Lions, like the last record they did, Island.
Yep.
I sat in while they were writing and played bass, and kind of like co-wrote a lot of the songs that were on that record, and then I played bass on the record.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
And kind of like, I guess, co-produced the record with the band. So yeah, like when they're, and since that record came out, it's been pretty quiet with Lions, but we've just had so much time, and we'll get together on the weekends and jam, and we're like, oh well, maybe we should work on some Lions stuff, or maybe put out an EP or something. So I've been jamming with those guys and just kind of messing around. But we've got like the skeleton of one song finished, I guess, right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, it's nice that you have guys out that way to still be, productive and creative with, and get to play music. I didn't realize you'd had a hand in that last album. That's awesome. I love that album.
Yeah, it's a good record. I think it's their best record.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was your experience like growing up with music? When did you discover music, and when did it kind of really start to impact your life?
I think I kind of started to be drawn to music at a pretty young age. Little things like songs in cartoons or songs on the radio and stuff. I was drawn into those sort of things. And then I think when I started to like kind of like identify or like relate with music was sort of when I have an older sister who's a few years older than I am. And I think when she started to actually get into, music, bands like Pearl Jam and Red Hot Chili Peppers and stuff, I saw her, listening to that stuff, and that kind of rubbed off on me. But I guess, like when it's hard for me to put an age on it, but I guess probably like around like 10 or 11 years old, I started, buying cassettes and listening to music.
Yeah, that's awesome. And did was, like you say, your sister was into music? Was there music kind of around the house otherwise, or did you have friends into the same stuff, or was she kind of your main influence on that?
I guess she was kind of the main influence. My parents were never like overly into music, like they would have cassettes in the car and stuff, but my dad listened to like a lot of like I guess modern pop country stuff. And when I say modern, I mean at the time. And my mom was into sort of funny stuff, Pointer Sisters and Robert Palmer and stuff like that.
Okay.
That's sort of the stuff I remember kicking around. But yeah, my family wasn't like overly musical, but they didn't like try and like keep us away from it or anything, like my parents were kind of like just kind of pushed us into whatever we seemed interested in. So when we were younger, we had a piano in the house. My sister was taking piano lessons, so then I would take piano lessons. And then I think around the age that I sort of like had expressed to my parents that I wanted to play guitar, they were like supportive of it, but I'd tried so many things as a kid. They were just like, okay, well, you can try this out for a while, and then if you stick to it, we'll take further steps with it.
Yeah. Was your sister going to any live shows, or when did you kind of start realizing that you could go and actually see a band live that you liked or listened to?
Yeah, I mean, I remember her going to a Pearl Jam concert, like when they would have been touring on like 10 or something. And then just her like explaining to me like a mosh pit. And I can remember like in my mind thinking like it was literally like a skate bowl or something that would be in a concert hall or something, a literal pit. But yeah, so she had gone to that concert. I mean, like shortly after that, like the time can't be there can't be too much time between it. But when I was in junior high school, I guess the first like real like concert I ever would have gone to was like Soundgarden and Reverend Horton Heat. And I would have been like in the 7th grade, probably.
Wow.
Maybe, yeah, 7th grade, I think. And then like right after that, there was kind of just stuff that I liked going to that, and it was really cool. And after that, I saw Green Day around that era. Like I kind of went to like these bigger concerts first, and then
that's awesome.
And then as I got into sort of punk music and stuff, I discovered what was going on in my community around me.
Yeah. So was that in Vancouver? Is that where you grew up?
No, I grew up in Alberta.
Oh, okay. In Edmonton?
Yeah. In St. Albert, just outside of Edmonton.
Oh, okay. So when would have you gone to like your first kind of local show? Like when would have you connected that, that someone like you could play music, or, where it wasn't this big stage, this big production, but more of just kind of a thing where it was just maybe a smaller crowd or people like you coming together instead of, because a lot of time with those big arena shows, it's such a vast variety of people, you go see, I don't know where Green Day would have played then, but it's probably not full of like just 12-year-olds or 14-year-olds or however old, right? So it's Like, when would have you kind of connected that? Okay, this is kind of like a youth thing. It's not just anybody goes to these, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've talked about this a lot, that like maybe I like kind of like skip steps a lot of the time or like miss details. But like I think like, just being in junior high school and starting to get into like punk bands and stuff, there was some like local bands in St. Albert that would play, but they were like more metal bands. There was only really like one kind of punk band called No Incentive, and they kind of played locally like once or twice a year kind of thing. So I feel like I would have gone to like one of those shows first, and then like kind of like ventured out into the big city to go see a show. But like I'm not sure which was like I'm not sure which one would have been first, but like there's like two shows that stick out to me. I went and saw like a hall show, probably like this would have been the first like local punk hall show that I went to in Edmonton, in the city, which was Anti-Flag, DBS, the Everymen, I think Slugger, Race Trader, and I think Misdemeanor played too.
Okay, yeah, that's an awesome
if I have
lineup.
that correctly. Yeah, so it was like sort of my first exposure to Edmonton local bands. And I had seen I think I'd seen like DBS's video for Snowball on Much Music at some point, and that was kind of like I knew that they were like younger kids, and that was kind of like a motivation to like maybe try and write my own songs, or like basically thinking like, oh yeah, I guess I could do this if I put my mind to it, sort of thing. And you know what, I think that would have been before, because like not too long after that I would have gone to see Rancid touring on Out Come the Wolves, which actually came out 25 years ago today.
Yeah, I was gonna say happy birthday, Rancid.
Yeah, so I saw that show, and DBS actually opened that show as well with AFI too. So I mean, early on there was like some pretty cool shows that were pretty inspiring, and it was like once I went to those couple shows, it seemed like there was so much going on at that point. Like I feel like within like a month of that show, I saw like Face to Face and 10-Foot Pole and Bouncing Souls and like all these bands, and all of a sudden I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like it's right here, it's happening all the time.
Yeah, so you still would have been like how old then, like 14, 15, like still kind of starting high school? Or
well, like 7th and 8th grade probably. And I mean, I graduated when I was 17, so probably like 12 or 13 years old.
Yeah, that's crazy. Like that was only when I was just starting to discover that stuff. Like it was probably at least 3, 4, or 5 years after that I actually got an opportunity to see one of those bands live. So
I mean, Regina's probably wasn't like a hotbed at that point, right?
Well, I grew up in a small town in Manitoba, so we were 3.5 hours from Regina. So
oh wow,
my first show was actually MXPX in Winnipeg in '99, so I would have been maybe 14 or 15 by that point.
Yeah.
And we didn't have internet, so I wouldn't have even known about a lot of those shows until kind of later in high school, when I met some friends who were connected in Regina, and by that point a lot of those bands were coming through Regina, and so we would drive up here and see Good Riddance and Strung Out, Snapcase, like, so that was kind of when things really started to peak. And then when we moved here, of course, there was a lot more of that. But man, that's amazing to be that young and to just kind of have that influence kind of in your life already.
Yeah, I definitely look back on that stuff, and I'm very grateful that I for like people of our age to see some of those bands at that point is pretty cool.
Yeah. So you were playing guitar already then? Like you said, when you saw DBS, that kind of made you think that you could do that. So when did you kind of pick up a guitar and kind of correlate that you could, be playing some of these songs, in your room or learning some of that?
Yeah, I think it was around the same point, like probably like the 7th grade. A lot of my friends were playing guitar, and it was kind of hard to come by drummers. There was a couple friends that had drum kits, but they were not good drummers. And then a lot of my friends were playing guitar, but like the music that they were kind of into was more like Metallica and Pantera and Fear Factory. So they were kind of like learning to play guitar to those songs and stuff, which was cool. Like I never disliked those bands. Like I like those bands, but it was like just not for me. And so I eventually just decided like I should probably play guitar because then I can write my own music. I think that was the motivation. That's the way I want to remember it, I think.
And
I would have just started kind of playing guitar and finding my own kind of path with that stuff. Which is kind of funny too. Like I said, with a lot of like my friends being more into like metal and stuff like that. They would I would hang out with those dudes, but they'd also like kind of make fun of me for listening to punk.
Right. Which is funny because it's definitely different, but it's not, as different as, country or, something. It's still, kind of underground, the people that play the music, might have, tattoos or piercings or long hair but I guess, back then, I know what you mean. Like, especially in a small town, like something like punk was definitely pretty out there. And so thankfully now a lot of those genres kind of mix a bit more together and it's not so kind of out there to listen to, more than one style of music. So that's cool.
Yeah.
So
when you're a kid too, like it's really important for you to like identify as somebody or have an identity.
Yeah, for sure.
So, being a punk or being a metalhead is really important, but I've always enjoyed all kinds of music, but it is funny to like think about stuff like that, like having friends that were like listening to like Cannibal Corpse or something and then being like, they hear Strung Out or Lagwagon and they're like, what is this bullshit? But you're like, dude, they're like shred guitar players. Like they're like as good as these like metal players. It's, the music isn't too different, but
yeah. So when would have you connected with people that were into the same kind of music to play a band with? Like, what was your first band experience or jamming with other people?
So I had like a friend in junior high school that like I got along with really well, who we just kind of like connected through skateboarding or like skateboard culture, I guess. And he was kind of the only other dude that was like into punk music. So we just kind of like, we wanted to start a band. And eventually like we found kids from like other junior high schools that were like into some of the same stuff. Cause growing up in like a smaller community, your world is still pretty limited to like the school you go to.
Right.
And then even just like, where I grew up, like your neighborhoods are separated by these schools. So it's like, I didn't know a lot of kids in different, like neighborhoods within the same suburb, but, kind of with each school, there was probably like 2 or 3 kids that were into punk music that were playing instruments. So we had met some guys, I don't know where or like how through, but this dude named Rahil, who was like a drummer, and he was actually good. Like he could play like a punk beat, and it wasn't bad, like he could like toe, like a toe pivot, like he could like play like a fast punk beat, and it was like good. And we were like, whoa, this is crazy. And he was really into like kind of like Operation Ivy, and more like ska punk stuff. But
right.
So we just started jamming with him, and that was kind of like our first experience like writing our own songs, I guess. And they were really bad, and they got better, Yeah,
I guess that's how it goes when when you're kind of just learning, because it's a big difference from, and I still think about this all the time when I listen to a record, and it's like, how do guys like compose this all together, right? Because everyone's playing their own thing, but you're trying to make it cohesive. And so those early years, you can still see it now if you go see like a Battle of the Bands or something. It's like, okay, these guys, you can tell when someone is just playing their own thing versus playing together. And I just kind of I love how just the time and the effort it takes to kind of listen and figure out what the other person in the band is playing, and then how that kind of correlates, and just a kind of a cool part of music, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's funny too, because at that age, like your influences are so vast. Like, to me, like there wasn't like subgenres within punk. Like a punk band was a punk band, so it's like like I would. To me, Good Riddance and Operation Ivy were in the same category, and we were like drawing influences from these bands that were like sonically quite different.
Yeah.
But in our minds, it was like, yeah, it's all the same thing. It's cool. So it's like, the music we were writing was probably pretty funny in retrospect, because you'd have like skate punk stuff mixed with like ska punk stuff mixed with, we were starting to get into like some of the like crusty punk stuff, like Profane Existence bands. And so like, yeah, we were influenced from all angles at that point, which is kind of like a cool place to be. You're not like I guess jaded by anything, or like you're not feeling like limited by the bands you're listening to, or like the sound that your band has, I guess.
Yeah, it's just more putting together what sounds good to you versus we can play this song because it's not skate punk. It's like, yeah, but it sounds cool and it fits into what we like. So, I mean, whatever, right? Just go for it.
And it's kind of funny how that like comes full circle. Not to jump ahead in conversation too much, but it's like I find like with my bands now, being almost 40 years old and still writing like punk music and stuff, it's like now I almost feel like with these bands that I play in that have sort of like these identities of the way they sound, a lot of the times, like now when I'm writing music, I try not to think about that. You know what I mean? Like, right. I just try and think about writing a cool song, and then like kind of just by default, no matter what we do, it's going to end up sounding like a Comeback Kid song or a Misery Signal song or Living with Lions song or whatever, because like, the people playing the music is kind of what like, not kind of, is directly what makes the songs sound the way they are, So it's like, you can take like a super simple idea for any of those bands, and it could be like something that seems out of the box, but once you get, once you put all the ingredients in it, it ends up being like one of those band songs. So it's kind of a cool thing to see, or like kind of recognize as a songwriter as I get older,
Yeah. This is kind of an overarching question, but how have you not grown out of this kind of music? I mean, you've been doing this for, 20 plus years already. How do you find, just continued inspiration and a desire to still kind of feed this desire of this kind of music? Because lots of people who have played in bands over years, get to a point where, there's one side where it's like, I'm just sick of touring and all that. And then there's another side where it's, like, I'm done with this kind of music. I'm just not interested anymore. So what is it that kind of keeps you going in this type of music, in this scene?
I think it's just, it has always, and I think it forever will. It just resonates with something inside me. And it's like hard to put like like an exact explanation on, I guess. I mean, like, when you're a kid and you first hear music, if it inspires you or you like it, or, it gives you like a feeling. And there's just something about like the music itself, and I guess like the ideals and the ethos and the just the whole vibe, everything about punk rock and sort of, I guess, metal or just alternative music that resonates with me. And it's kind of like it's a weird question to ask, or it's a weirder question to answer. But I mean, I've been doing this stuff now for well over 20 years and into punk rock and supporting punk rock for 25 years, if not longer,
Yeah.
And yeah, I just think it's part of like who I am. And, when I'm an old man, I'm still going to be listening to these records and supporting bands. But it is a crazy thing. Like, I don't know, man. I was yesterday, some friends of mine who play in a band called Be Well, released
awesome band.
their LP. And yeah, I mean, for anybody listening who doesn't know, it's like stacked. I mean, it's Brian McTurnan, who is an amazing producer and has been in amazing bands. And my friend Mike from Darkest Hour, and my friend Aaron from Bane. This guy Peter, who played in Fairweather, who I met recently when we played with.
Another awesome band from the early 2000s.
It's just such a stacked band. And last fall we did some shows with Be Well, and they're such a crazy, amazing band. And like I had met Brian McTurnan in passing. Just like we had popped into Salad Days one time or something. And I just met him in passing, but doing those shows with him last September and just chatting with him. And he's just like such a such an amazing, nice guy. And like, just to think about like all the things he's been involved with, and like he's still just like so like personable and down to earth, and like such a good dude to talk to. And yeah, I was just kind of like floored by meeting him, and he's such a cool guy. And anyway, so yeah, they put out this record yesterday, and I popped it on when I was out for a walk in the morning. And this kind of comes full circle to the question you asked. When I was listening to it, there was just something about it that made my entire body tingle, and just like a feeling that I can't necessarily put into words, but it just like made me react emotionally and physically in a way that, like, you know, only punk music or hardcore can do. There's something so sincere and something so like beautiful about, you know, Brian's lyrics and his vocal delivery, and, you know, the progression of the music and everything. It just comes together in this way that like gives you feeling. And I think that's something that's like not all music can do. Some music is like just bullshit, you know, but like punk and hardcore have spirit and they have energy, those genres, you know. And I guess if that answers your question, you know, there's something about it that moves me to this day.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the perfect answer. I mean, it's very similar for myself. I'm not in a band anymore, but it's just one of those things, because I like to ask band guys that, because I get asked that, you know, because I've got lots of friends that I grew up with, you know, as a teenager, into a lot of the same kind of music, and then, you know, they kind of hit adulthood and it's like, oh, you know, I'm just not interested in that anymore. And I can't fathom doing that. Like, it just seems like it'd be kind of throwing away who I am as a person. And I guess another part of that question could be, how do you kind of feel you still have something to say in music? You know, like, so for myself, I still write music just to be creative, but I'll often feel like, you know, I don't have anything cool to write or say that hasn't been done or said before. Do you ever find that kind of blocks you, or is it just like, whatever, that's how the world is? Everyone kind of puts out what they want, and if it brings them joy or somebody else, then it's good to go.
Yeah, I don't think there's like limitations or like, I don't think you can like say something's more or less important if someone is trying to express themselves through music, because I think that's the whole point of it. But I think I'm lucky in a sense that, you know, being in a band, you have 5 people or however many people in your band to sort of like create something collectively and drive a message or a feeling to people that are listening to your music. So I think it would be harder if I was writing everything, you know, lyrically and musically,
right,
to always be putting something out that, like, you know, seems really important. But I think thankfully, again, like, I don't have to write a lot of the lyrics and stuff. So like, you know, for my contributions with music, I guess it's creating a mood or a feeling through the music, you know. So it just comes down to like, I'm always moved by the music, you know. For me personally, like with bands too, like a lot of it is I get into the music before I get into the lyrics, you know.
Yeah, me too.
And that's the same way that I write, you know. Like I write a song based on how it makes me, how, you know, those notes and progressions make me feel, and those moods that you can create. So I don't think there's like a ceiling on that sort of inspiration. Like, I think like, as long as you feel, if you still feel something for making music, you're going to keep doing it.
Yeah. I had a really interesting conversation for an upcoming episode with a guy, and he said that he always writes all of his lyrics first, because if he doesn't feel like he has anything to say lyrically, then why even kind of make music? And I just thought that was a really interesting, because I'm with you, like, I'm always more attracted to the music immediately versus lyrics, and I know it kind of goes back and forth with different music fans, but I just never kind of heard that said, where it's like, if I've got nothing to say, then what's the point of just like creating a bunch of music if I've got nothing to kind of put out there that I care about or that I think anybody else is going to want to care about?
Yeah, sure. And I mean, if that's your perspective, that's totally cool. It's different for everybody. I mean, that's kind of the cool thing with music, right?
Yeah. So was Misery Signals the first kind of major band you joined?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's like the first real band I was ever in. I did some stuff, uh, again, like locally, and like really sort of like minimal touring, between like BC and Alberta and stuff, but nothing ever like that was considered like a full-time gig. And I mean, I think like, Misery Signals was relatively established when I joined. They had put out an EP and they were like on the legs of touring with Seven Angels, Seven Plagues for years before that.
Right.
So going into that situation, it was definitely the first, like, what felt like the first like real band I was in that felt like we were gonna like chase after something.
Yeah. So how did you come about to meet those guys and get connected with them? And at that time, did you already have it in your mind that like this is what I want to do for the next number of years or rest of my life, or was it like, oh, this would be a cool opportunity, I'm just going to jump in and do it?
No, for sure. I mean, like in the Edmonton scene at that time, I had bands that were playing local shows and stuff, and I was almost like kind of like salty about being in the position I was in, because I wanted to tour and I wanted to be in a band, but like I just didn't have the tools to get out of the city and tour. I didn't have 4 other people that wanted to like pursue something, and frankly, I don't know if those bands were really something worth doing with that at that time. So I was introduced to the guys who were in Misery Signals through their old band, Seven Angels, Seven Plagues. Compromise had done some shows with them, and my old band Pressure Point did like 1 or 2 shows with them. And then, of course, that's the story about Compromise.
Yeah.
Who, were in a fatal van accident, well on tour of Seven Angels, Seven Plagues. And the way that all kind of panned out is, after everything had happened there, Jesse, the singer from Compromise, began singing with Seven Angels, Seven Plagues, which didn't last very long, and that quickly turned into Misery Signals. And then, Misery Signals got off the ground and recorded an EP and started touring. And, within kind of like a month or 2 of that band existing, their guitar player at the time, Jeff, who's still a friend of the band and a good friend of ours, he later went on. Well, he was playing in With Honor at the time, and then continued to play with Honor after he had left Misery Signals. But he left the band, and then Jesse was home for Christmas or something, and he had mentioned in passing that Jeff was leaving the band, but they were going to continue on and just find another touring guitar player. And I just said, "Oh, let me try, and that's how it happened." So, and I think, like, thankfully Jesse kind of was in my corner for that. I think he wanted somebody from home. I think he saw some merit in having somebody like from his circle in the band.
Yeah.
And I think it was important to him to try and get me in the mix, thankfully, and in the end it worked out. But yeah, that's how it happened. Jesse came home and said, we're going back on tour in March or April. And we need a guitar player. And I said, okay, I'm going to do it. So then I just learned the songs, and the rest is history, man.
Yeah. Did you find that a hard transition, like starting to tour, or was it just so exciting and what you wanted to do that you just kind of dove in head first?
Yeah, definitely. It was very exciting and stuff like that. I wasn't like the most proficient guitar player at the time. So that was a challenge, was learning to play and keep up with Ryan and Brandon, who were both, really great musicians.
Yeah.
So there was a bit of a learning curve there. And I mean, in retrospect, it's a great thing, because it definitely made me a better guitar player and a more creative writer. But the touring itself was like super exciting. Of course it was, and in my mind, like, I can remember like being like, I would have been 18 or 19 or something. And I was working at a record shop down at the mall that was right across the street from where I was living at the time. And my dad came to meet me for breakfast or something. And I remember telling him like, oh yeah, there's, think I'm going to go try out for this band. And in my mind, I was like, they're going to be this big band and I think it's going to be really cool. And he was like, well, you should do it then. You got to do it. So, I went and did that. And then it's funny, like a month later, we're just playing like hall shows to like 15 kids some nights and things like that, living off a bag of cookies for 3 days. And, but it's all exciting when you're that age, like it was definitely very cool. I'd never really toured America much, and there was a lot to see and meeting all sorts of like new like-minded people. And like, especially like being a kid that grew up in a Canadian suburb, to go down to the United States and just see how vast, these music scenes were and how many people were involved and like how many great bands and how many great people were out there doing things. And I mean, to this day, there's a lot of relationships that I made on that first tour that I've maintained, 20 years later.
Yeah. Is your dad still alive?
Yeah. He turned 75 this year.
What is he? So like, let's say with some of these maybe bigger European festivals or things that you got to play, like what does he think of that now? If he sees a picture of that, or
yeah. I mean, he loves it, and like he's super. My parents have always been like super supportive of me doing this, and they saw me through like a lot of like, from their perspective, watching me just kind of like live like a vagrant.
Right.
But they knew I loved it, so they were always supportive of it. And they've always been great about it. And, I have a good relationship with my dad, especially when I was in my 20s, we were really, really close. And as he gets older and becomes more of a curmudgeonly old man, some of the aspects of that relationship have died down a bit, but we still get along really well. And, I love my dad. We talk often, and he's a big supporter of what I do. Yeah. And it's great. I mean, I wish there's a part of me that, especially now with like touring being like on hold, I'm like, in retrospect, I wish, could have brought my dad out for a few days in Europe or something, or, something cool like that. Come ride on the bus for a couple days and enjoy it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we're going to kind of jump ahead a little bit here. Still with Misery Signals, but so your new album, Ultraviolet, was recently released just a few weeks ago. And, I mean, I got to say, it's an amazing album. There's a lot to it, as there always is with Misery Signals, and I've got through it a few times, and every time I get to the end, I'm just excited to listen again because I know there's going to be something I missed. How has the response been so far since releasing this?
Well, first of all, thanks a lot. Like, I appreciate that. I appreciate you checking it out, and I'm glad you enjoy it. And yeah, the response has been great. People seem really happy with it. I mean, the only negative comments I see are people just being like, it should have been longer, and they might be right, but other than that, it's been a really, really, the positive response has been overwhelming. There's no end to the nice comments people have made, and it seems like people are really enjoying the record, and so that's like a relief. We put years into making it, and there's a lot of material that we trashed, and there's stuff that didn't make the record that might see the light of day sometime, but the response has been really good.
How does it feel like releasing an album kind of during this time? Obviously when you guys were starting this process, I mean, you had no idea what was going to come, and I mean, the cool part of it is now you can say, like, I was still in a band that released an album during this global pandemic, and I think there's something, there's been a few times where I've seen where bands have, postponed the release of their album during this, and I mean, there's been some amazing records come out this year, and I think that's really kind of adding to just keeping music fans kind of alive and well during this time. So thanks for still being willing to put that out during this time.
Yeah, I mean, we knew. I mean, like, I kind of think we had originally, we were trying to get it out at like the end of last year, and then it was just taking us a long time to like really agree on things with the mix and things like that. So there was a lot of back and forth that ended up being like kind of months of back and forth when you start getting into mix revisions and things like that. So it kind of like worked out in that sense. And then, when we had the release date set, and we knew that it was going to be a complication with COVID just in regard to being able to like perform release shows for the record. But at the same time, we had the shows booked, and we just kind of said, we'll stick with it. What happens, happens. Thankfully, a lot of the ways people get our music is through Spotify or Apple Music, and sort of all these digital formats. So, as far as like releasing the record goes, it was kind of unaffected. I mean, it didn't really like change anything.
Yeah.
We're not on a label. We don't have like a marketing schedule or anything. So it's just kind of like, we've been saying it's going to come out. It's going to come out on that day. We've got pre-orders up. People have pre-ordered the record. Like, it's not going to make a difference. So we just went for it. And I mean, it's unfortunate that we can't do any touring for the album right now, but like kind of in the same way, it's kind of cool to let the record sit and allow people to have some time with it and, get excited about it.
Yeah.
And then, hopefully when that time comes that we're able to play some shows, sort of in celebration of the record being released, hopefully people will be familiar with the material and it'll make those shows that much more special.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point because, I mean, obviously anybody that knows anything about music is when a band puts out an album, almost immediately they start touring, and if they're not touring already. And I've thought about that lots this year, bands that put out an album, March, April, and it's like, who knows when they'll get to play those songs again, which, really sucks for that band. But I never really thought of, just how much time the fans are now going to have. So when those shows come, it's almost going to be like just that much more ready to go.
Yeah. And I mean, it's cool too. Like you see, like, thankfully with social media, for better or worse, people are able to comment and say what they want about all the hard work you've done.
Yeah.
But it's cool that, you'll see comments about some songs. Like there's 2 songs on the record that people have commented on quite a bit. And it's like, I don't think those necessarily would have been in the set list. But now we know, when the time comes to get out there and be able to play some of these songs live, we'll include those songs in the set because it's like songs that people have had a lot to say about. So,
yeah. What was the plan always to self-release this album, or was there any ever thought of doing it on a label, or at this point, does that just not have value for your band?
I mean, I definitely think there is value to working with a label, and it's something that we went back and forth about quite a bit internally, because Misery Signals had released a previous record, Absent Light, independently.
Right.
And I think it was a positive experience for the band. But they also, so when the last record, Absent Light, that the band did, I wasn't involved in, nor was Kyle or Jesse. And, so it was really Ryan and Brandon who had experienced what it was like to put the record out that way. And from an outsider point of view, like, I watched the band do it, and I think it was great that they had the freedom to retain ownership of the music, and, any sort of profit would come back to the band instead of the label, which I think is, one thing that's wrong with the music industry as it is. But I also saw that album didn't get a lot of exposure. You didn't see it in a lot of places. And like, I'm not trying to say anything negative about it, but I don't feel like that record had the reach that previous Misery Signals records had been given. So that was, one of the points of sort of debate with the band going into this record was like, there's definite benefits to releasing the album on your own, and then there's obvious benefits to releasing it with a label. So we had spoken to a couple labels, and everybody that we had spoken to was very cool. They were, pretty willing to give us what we needed to do it. But Ryan was sort of the main advocate for pushing for self-release. And he had said, I've done this before and I'll do it again. Like I have no problem putting in the work to do it. And we just kind of said, okay. And, thankfully we had the help of Basic Records in the UK to facilitate us getting the record out, in the UK and Europe. So people did have access to physical copies of the record over there through Basic, which is great. And I mean, that's kind of like, one of the, hurdles of self-releasing a record. And I mean, that's kind of like one thing that we're trying to figure out now too, is, we did a pre-order for the record and the first pressing sold out. So then we did a second pressing and it sold out. And people are still just receiving those now. But now we're at a point where it's like, okay, so the record's been out 2 weeks, but it's not in record shops. There's no physical copies of it available online. So now we're just like, oh man, I guess we need to like do another pressing. But that pressing itself won't even be ready for another 2 months. So that's kind of like a downfall of releasing the record yourself.
Right.
We kind of undershot, not that it's like a wildly successful release here, but we undershot sort of maybe how many copies we should have pressed, just because we didn't know how it was going to be received.
Well, yeah, and you don't want to have, hundreds of copies of vinyl just sitting around. And so, while it sucks that not everybody who would want to have it can have it, there's also something special, just even for myself, I've been seeing lots, like, just people excited to get it, and it almost feels, almost a bit more special when it's like, oh, I got in on the first pressing or the second pressing, or it kind of keeps music fans engaged a bit more, and it is, on streaming. So if people, they can still listen to it. But getting that physical copy almost feels, just a bit more special as a music fan.
Yeah, I definitely see the benefit in that for sure. And that's kind of the thing. Like, we're not like sweating about it, because, like, we're not like, it's not like in such demand that like, we're missing out on like changing our lives with the money from this record. It's not like we're going to like buy a yacht or something, but, there's definitely missed opportunities in that regard, as far as, the band could be making a little more money off the release. And then like I said, even more importantly, just like having it accessible to people, it's kind of like a bummer that people can't go into a record shop and buy it.
Yeah.
But also, like, as you said, like, it's better to have people wanting it than it just, being in boxes in Ryan's living room or something,
Yeah. Well, you know what? There's often times I go to the music store and they still don't have things in stock from, other bands that do have CDs or distribution. So I don't know, maybe you're missing out, but I think for the amount of people that do streaming, that's a huge thing, right? It'd be a whole different thing if they couldn't even access the music, but it's kind of out there. So what kind of, if any, learning curves did you have with this record? You're back in the band. There was a change in vocalist. How was that kind of regrouping, even if it was from different areas, but kind of how'd that feel coming together again and being creative with those changes?
There's definitely there was some ups and downs with things. We hadn't written a record together with this lineup in, at that point it was like 12 or 13 years.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So there was, like I said, there was some ups and downs, and I think like, we're all pretty opinionated and we're all pretty confident in ourselves as songwriters and artists. So it was like, we were butting heads on occasion, but overall it went well. But yeah, I think it was just a lot of like, kind of like trial and error and finding our stride and finding what works for us now, as opposed to when we were 20-year-old kids.
Yeah. So what does like a typical Misery Signal song look like coming together? Is it, just sending riffs back and forth, or do you kind of say, all right, you write 4 songs, you write 4, or how does that look?
Yeah, I mean, it was different to when we were writing when we were younger, because with previous Misery Signals records, with Malice, with Mirrors, with Controller, those records were all written with us in a room together, day in, day out for probably about 2 months at a time when we were writing those records. Whereas now, everybody is living in a different location. We were doing a lot of stuff remotely, sending a lot of ideas back and forth via email and things like that. Both Ryan and Jesse have families, and I mean, they have kids, like, so how busy that can make your day.
Yeah.
So those were definite hurdles that we had to go about. And it's also hard too, like as convenient as text messaging and emails are, it's hard to really interpret tone or I guess just the delivery of certain comments or criticisms, So like if you're in a room, you could be like, yeah, I don't know, man. And the guy might be like, oh yeah, okay, cool, you're right. But like, in an email, you're like, I don't like this or something. It can just like come off the wrong way,
For sure.
So there was aspects like that were a little, it's hard to be, you really have to like walk on eggshells when you're like communicating via text or email. There was definitely points through this process where, I would be sitting on my couch just boiling, just like angry, because it's just so hard to like communicate certain things. But, we got through it and we did the best we could. And I think, because there was so much back and forth, and I think there was a lot of pressure to make this record really matter. You know what I mean? Like, going into this, Ryan had sort of said, I wanted to kind of like take a back seat and just be like less precious about things and just kind of let things happen organically. Whereas with me, I was really just trying to be like, just really cracking the whip and like, just trying to say like, no, it's gotta be better. It's gotta be better. And like really going over everything with like a microscope, which like, I think, has benefits and also has its detriments. So I don't know. I mean, overall, I think we're all really happy with the way the record came out, and the process itself was like I said, it had its ups and downs, but like, I think we're all capable of recognizing that, we like each other as friends, we like each other as people, and we're going to have these sort of moments of contention. And that happens when you're all creating something that you care about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, as much as it's hard to go through those emotions, I mean, often that's what's going to produce the best outcome. And like you said, right, like you want it to be the best it can be, and that is a hard place to get to. It doesn't come easily. And so thankfully the music, is going to stand out, right? It's not, when somebody hears this, they're not thinking, oh, I wonder, if the band was fighting during this time, right? In the end, it's the songs that are going to stand out and are going to continue your name, right? And so, that's okay to kind of go through those ups and downs of the process for sure.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I think it, in the long run, I think it all worked out.
Yeah. What would you say are some of the maybe proudest moments with Misery Signals, kind of, not including this album, but just in your time in the band? What are some of the things that you think back on?
I mean, I think of Malice and the Magnum Heart is a very important record for us. And I think, on whatever scale it is, to me, it feels like it's a record that's really important to a lot of people worldwide.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's cool. And I mean, like, whatever listeners' opinion is, or people out there, like, people might be like, oh, nobody cares about that band. But I mean, like, some people do. And we get a lot of love for that record. And even like a lot of musicians, and like, our peers and stuff will say like, that's a really important record for the metalcore genre. And it for some people, it's like a genre defining record. And that's a cool thing, like,
yeah, it's crazy.
Makes me like proud of what we did there. And so that record itself is pretty important. And I feel like in a weird way, like, Jesse and I being a part of Misery Signals had like a pretty cool impact on like Canada's sort of like hardcore and metal scene. Like, like we, for some reason, we, have always felt at home in Canada. I mean, Jesse and I are Canadian, but like, I feel like Canada was always like really supportive and kind of looked at us in a sense as sort of like torch carriers for that genre. And, it's, so that's a cool thing too, is to feel like, we've had a positive impact on other bands and younger kids trying to get into music and touring and recording records. So yeah, that stuff is all really important. And I mean, Misery Signals gave us a lot of opportunities when we were younger that we, wouldn't have had. We going to Southeast Asia, touring in Japan, touring in Europe, doing all those sort of things. Like, those are all feathers in our cap. Those were cool things to do.
Yeah, with an album like Malice, like you mentioned, I mean, it has such a such a legacy to it. And I mean, there was a lot of emotion around that record, like you had mentioned before, with the band Compromise and some of those things. And do you find that having a record like that, like, is it always kind of at the back of your mind, kind of eating away at you when you're writing? Like, I mean, I never stop seeing comments about it, even with a new record coming out. I would talk to friends, and Malice comes up, and like, at what point do you just kind of say, like, that was its own album. We're not doing another album that's going to be like that. We're still trying to create songs that we like. But do you find that that's a hindrance having, obviously it's amazing having it, but I just think, I mean, there's a lot of bands like that, right? Where maybe they shifted styles after a popular album, or just for whatever reason, one album was a lot more popular. And so it's kind of always there that people are always going to reference. Or have you found that easy to just kind of say, like, well, whatever it is, what it is?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think every band kind of, with, who has like more than one record, they have a record that sort of defines that band's sound. And dare I say, that was sort of our lightning in a bottle, lightning in a jar, lightning in a bottle moment,
Yeah.
And again, like, this kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like, Misery Signals, we knew that we were a heavy band, but we didn't know, that there was no like sub classification to the way we sounded. So when we wrote those songs, we were just trying to write cool songs.
Yeah.
And then, like, once you do that, and then people kind of like pigeonhole you into that sort of sound, they expect that sort of stuff from you. And it I don't think we ever really shifted sonically,
right.
Too much, to be honest. Like, I think the production differences from Malice to Mirrors were different. I think if Mirrors would have had that big Devin Townsend production, I think some people would love that record just as much as they love Malice.
Right.
Musically, I think like Malice obviously has a huge part of Jesse personally in it that people connect with. And I think a lot of his emotion is really well portrayed in that record. So I understand why people connect with it, and it's a very important album to the band as well. But yeah, it just represents a time, I think, with the band where everything was fun and exciting and new, and sort of limitless. The possibilities were limitless when we made that record, whether that be the music we were writing or what was to come if people liked the record.
Yeah.
So there's that sort of excitement. We hadn't gotten to the next step yet, and that was sort of like the thing that might do it for us. And I don't know. Yeah, it's a cool record, and I look back on it fondly, and I appreciate that people love it so much.
Yeah, and that's one of I mean, with music, everything is a chance, right? Like, there's a chance that album could have come out and people would have still liked it, but it could have just kind of, people just moved on. And so it's not like you ever know as a band what's going to be, a fan favorite or not. And, it really shouldn't be. It should be what the band is excited about. And I mean, obviously you want to cater to your fans, but you're not, a good band's not going to do that just to make the fans happy, right? They're not going to make a part 2 of an album. Maybe some do make a part 2 just because they know it will sell, but not it with a band like you guys. There's more integrity and creativity in that, and so I didn't mean that as I hope that didn't come off as like a condescending question, but just I think about that a lot with even bands where I'm like that with, where it's like I don't like anything after that specific album. I wish they would have just done a part 2. So even as a music fan, sometimes I want that, but anyways, that's kind of a rambly thing, but just curious to kind of hear, as somebody who was a part of creating that, what's that feeling like? Is it always kind of looming over you, or is it, just kind of take it for what it's worth and glad people like it and move on?
Yeah, and definitely, like, I mean, those feelings existed when we were writing Ultraviolet. Like, we were thinking, like, people are going to expect like a sort of Malice part 2. But the thing is like a lot of those ideas and some of those songs, like, if we were to try and write those songs now, we would just be like, what is going on here? Like, we would be like, no. So it's like, it's a hard thing. And like, I have a hard time, like, not accepting, but like yeah, maybe I do. Maybe I have like a hard time like accepting people's like praise for music or things that we've done, because like um I just always feel like, there's so many other great bands out there doing these amazing things, and again, just coming back to it, like I don't want to like toot my own horn, or stand there and be like, yeah, we did this awesome record, but it's just such a cool thing that to like connect with people in that way, and like sort of have like one a record to look back on and be like, well, yeah, people really love this, and it's cool, we did a record that people like really care about and will probably care about for years to come, and it's neat now to like with sort of like this resurgence of like kind of metalcore being a thing that younger kids are into, I'll meet some younger kids now through touring with Comeback Kid or whoever, even with Misery Signals, that like they'll just be like, whoa, that's crazy that like you were in that band, or like you were a part of that record. And I don't know, it's a cool feeling.
Yeah. Any idea how much or how many copies that album sold?
I have no idea.
Like 10,000?
Literally no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to say. Like back then, like SoundScan is such a scam, dude. Like
Right.
people are lying about record sales left, right, and center with that stuff. Like going on tour and then being like, sorry, voice cracking. Going on tour and just like, every night at a venue, getting a venue rep to like sign your sheet saying like, oh yeah, we sold 150 records, but it's like, bands are like selling like 2 CDs and saying that they sold X amount of records.
Yeah.
And I'm sure labels are lying, and so who knows. I think we could safely say that record probably sold 50,000 copies.
Yeah.
Safely.
Yeah.
I think that seems realistic. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I guess you would be more up to date kind of on, throughout the years, album sales and stuff. But yeah, so we're going to move on here to now Comeback Kid. So how did you end up joining Comeback Kid? What was that transition like for you? Were you still like a touring musician before that opportunity came up, or kind of what did that look like that time?
Yeah. So around like 2010, I had stepped away from Misery Signals. We were kind of gearing up to like write another record. And I was just kind of at a point where, like, for me being a dude that was like always into like punk music more than like metal or hardcore or anything, playing Misery Signals was really cool, and it was always challenging, and it was fun, and I enjoyed the music. But when it came time to write another record, I just wasn't sure that I had it in me, just to like, okay, well, let's force out another record. Like I just wasn't feeling inspired by it at the time. And I mean, like, I feel bad saying it too in retrospect, but it's like, with Misery Signals, like we pushed so hard over the years. And then, it always felt like we were just never getting anywhere. It didn't feel like we were like growing. It didn't feel like all the hard work was paying off. And in retrospect now, when I look back at it, it's like, yeah, it was good. Like things were going well. It's just like when you're in it all the time, it's like just hard to recognize how could you have it, I guess.
Yeah.
But anyway, so just more or less, I was just kind of over it. And whether that meant that I was going to take a break or quit the band was just kind of like up in the air. And we had done a tour, and I'd gotten home from it. I just kind of said, like, I don't think I want to do another record. And Kyle sort of did the same thing. And around that time, Living with Lions was recording a record, and their singer Matt had quit.
Yeah.
Kind of like mid recording of that record. So Bill and Chase, who were just friends of mine throughout the years, just hit me up and were like, hey, like we need to find a singer. Do you want to like sing on this record and like do a couple tours just to like get us through like what they were doing, And I was like, I hadn't really sang much. I had like recorded an EP for this like side band that we were doing called Low Talker.
Oh yeah.
With
awesome band.
Which at the time was like a couple of guys from Comeback Kid and myself. And again, just kind of like a silly band where we didn't really know what we were doing. We were just kind of like writing music and recording it. And we had gotten to a point with Low Talker where we like had these songs recorded, but we had no vocals. So myself and the bass player Matt were like, well, we'll just sing. So we just sang on that. So that was kind of like my first experience, like singing on anything recorded. So I didn't really know what I was doing, and I didn't really have control of my voice or know anything about singing, but we just like bashed it out and released it. And that was kind of the reference that the guys in Living with Lions had to go off of. They were like, well, this sounds pretty good, so do you want to sing for our band? So and I mean, I love those dudes then, and I love them now. And I was like, yeah, like I love the band. Sure, let's do it. It's kind of this weird, like cool thing, but like curse that I have. Like, it's like, I loved Misery Signals. Like I love the EP, and then I joined the band, and then it's like, you can't listen to that band anymore and enjoy it the same way. And it's like the same with Lions. Like I joined Lions, and it's like, oh, well, now I can't like really enjoy this new record because I'm in the band. And then it's like the same with Comeback Kid, you know, like Comeback Kid's one of my favorite bands ever. And it's like, I can't enjoy the last few records the same way I did, you know, their previous records because I'm in the mix. But yeah, so anyway, I had left Misery Signals, and I was singing with Lions for about a year when my friend Casey, who was playing in Low Talker and Comeback Kid, he had been playing with Comeback Kid for about 5 years at that point, I think. And he had just kind of reached a point where I think he was kind of over the touring and stuff. And he had just mentioned to me kind of like, hey, I'm going to leave Comeback Kid. Why don't you play guitar? And I think that was like kind of like an easy answer. It like helped him leave the band without like causing any like sort of rifts. And, you know, I had known Andrew and Jeremy at that point for well over a decade. And so, you know, I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. So I just like, I hit up Andrew via text. He was like on some like crazy South Asian tour with his other band, Sights and Sounds.
Yeah.
And they were going to be over there for like a while. Like, I think they went over and did some shows, and then they stayed to like vacation. So the communication was kind of spotty, but, you know, like I'd hit him up and be like, man, I really want to play guitar. Like, you know, who else do you guys have in mind? And, you know, he mentioned like a couple other people, and I was just kind of like, no, man, like I'm the guy to do it. Let me do it. And, so, you know, I just kind of like started learning songs on my own, and then, sort of with the intention that like kind of like willing it into the universe, being like, well, I'll learn these songs and hopefully it'll work out. And then, you know, Andrew was like, okay, well, we got this tour, you know, why don't you play guitar on this tour and we'll see how it goes. And it's funny, like I know in retrospect now, like them being like, you know, we'll try it out. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, no, I'll just do it. But I get it now. Like, you know, you don't want to like, you know, we knew each other, but we didn't know each other that well. So you don't want to be like, yeah, join the band. And then like a month later, they're like, oh, this dude is a dickhead. But yeah, so I just kind of like learned the songs, and then we did that tour. And then, you know, in classic punk band fashion, they were like, we have another tour 2 weeks after this. You want to do that tour? I was like, yep. And then, you know, next thing you know, it's like been a year and you've been touring with the band, and that's how the story goes.
Yeah. What did that feel like joining like such an established band like that? Like you said, it kind of changed, you know, later on the music for you, but like, what was that like jumping into a band that, you know, I'm assuming, you know, all the tours were going really well. They were playing with, you know, bigger name bands. And would have you considered joining another band or joining them if they weren't so successful? Like, were you willing to still slug it out on tour, or what, did it make it easier knowing like, okay, you know, we've got, you know, hotels and food and all that kind of stuff covered, and there's hundreds, if not, you know, thousands of kids at each show? And
yeah, I mean, with Comeback Kid, like, I knew that they had, you know, established themselves quite well just on like a professional level of being a band. But also, like, I've just like, I mean, Turn It Around and Wake the Dead are like two records that were just like so perfect to me. You know, like Wake the Dead is like you know, it's like a defining record for me as far as like punk and hardcore goes. You know, it's like this perfect album of like skate punk mixed with like cool hardcore. And you know, we've talked about Broadcasting before too. Like I love that record.
Yeah,
like,
so good.
So I think like just like as far as like who the band was and the music they wrote, they've always been like my perfect band. You know, like I just think they do such a good job of combining all the things I love about melodic punk and hardcore into like their sound. So yeah, jumping into the band was like a no-brainer for me. It was it was like, I really want to be a part of this. And, I've always admired Andrew and Jeremy as songwriters, and they always just seem like they're like on top of their game and just writing really cool stuff and progressing with the band with each record, So yeah, I had no question about jumping into the band. And then it was pretty much exactly what I expected, man. I mean, like, Comeback Kid's a band that's pretty well celebrated. People love that band. And as much as they love the old material, people like the new records too, which is like a blessing,
Yeah, for sure.
And it's kind of a slow grow with Comeback Kid in that sense. Like, when we released Die Knowing, it was like a year later, people really liked those songs and they went well in like a live setting, but you really have to like slug that out for like a year to hammer those songs out. And it's the same with Outsider. Like, it takes a while for people to latch on to new material, but people still care about the band and people still come out, and, we're still all really into being into the band. So, yeah, it's a great thing to be a part of. And I definitely recognize how lucky I am to be not only involved with like a band that has, had a great track record and people still enjoy, but just like the people that are in the band, are such great people.
Yeah. How do you find the change in writing style, like from Misery Signals to Comeback Kids? So you mentioned, you're hoping to be doing some writing during this time with Comeback Kid. Like what does that look like versus Misery Signals, or what's your part in that?
So, I mean, with the last like couple Comeback Kid records, I've been involved with the songwriting. And it's usually like a situation, like, again, like with us all kind of like working on things remotely. I write a bunch of songs, Andrew writes a bunch of songs, and Jeremy writes a bunch of songs. So, like this session that we have coming up, like I'm going to go to Winnipeg, and it's just the three of us, but we're just going to spend, some days and evenings for about 2 weeks, just kind of like fleshing out these songs and finding, just kind of making some song structures out of them, and hopefully, doing some vocal demos and stuff like that. We've just like rented like a house. So, Jeremy's got his family there and his kids, so he'll be able to come out in the evenings, and then
yeah, sweet.
Andrew and I'll kind of spend the day just kind of putting some ideas together, and then hopefully we'll be able to get a bunch of ideas out. And then once we sort of have these like basic structures, I assume that we'll get in the room with Chase and Lauren as well and kind of start putting them together as a full band. But right now it's just like we have so much material, like to like have everyone in one room and sift through it would just be a nightmare. So
right. Yeah.
This will allow us to kind of like cherry pick the stuff that we really like and focus on that and kind of get, hopefully I would think, 10 to 15 kind of ideas down that we can work off of.
Yeah. Is that a pretty grueling process? Like, is it, you say, okay, here's 2 minutes of a song idea. Yes or no? Do we keep this to work on? No. Okay, move on to the next. Or like, how much kind of back and forth is there in that? Because I mean, if you have, 50 ideas that need to get into 10, 15 songs, how do you kind of dwindle that down? And, what is that process like?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I've described it. I mean, I think we, for sort of like every full song that's completed independently, I think like anywhere from like 50 to 70% of that song is good. And then, once everybody else kind of puts their own little touch on it, I think that's when it really comes together. So, leading up to this, preparing to this, Jeremy has sort of sent like 7 songs he feels really good about, and those have been shared with the band. And like for myself, like just with the amount of time that I have, like I write a lot of songs. So it's like, I've probably sent like over the last 2 years, I've probably sent like 30 songs to the guys, but,
wow.
I just like maybe last week, I just went through everything again, and Andrew said, can you just kind of send me like a more focused selection of these songs? So I went through and just kind of picked like 10 of them that I thought were kind of the ones to work off of and sent those to Andrew. And then, I think right now he's spending some time just going back, listening to everything and kind of preparing for when we all get together.
Yeah, man, that's gotta be such a, like kind of a a lot of pressure because it's like, these are the songs for the next album, and you don't really know, what's going to connect more with the fans when you have so much kind of input. So I mean, that's great that there's lots of ideas, but I'm sure at times it's, kind of frustrating to have so much and not really kind of know what to be spending time on.
Yeah, I mean, there's positives to it though. I mean, like, going into Outsider, I feel like we had a lot of material, but like I don't feel like we were as confident with the ideas when we went into writing that record. Whereas like with whatever this new record's going to be, just listening to the demos already, I feel like really, really confident about the ideas in these songs as opposed to like where we were with Outsider. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like really, really cool stuff that we'll be working off for these songs.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Maybe it's a cheesy thought, but when you guys are putting together an album, is there any like specific vision for it? Like, we want this to be heavier or faster, or is it just whatever songs kind of sound the best, we just put them all together?
Yeah, I think it does come down to like whatever songs sound the best. And I think like obviously everyone will have like their own independent vision of what they kind of think or foresee the record to be like Andrew typically is writing things that are a little more out of the box for Comeback Kid, because I think this being like the 7th record that he's done with the band, he's not like trying to write like minute and a half melodic hardcore song, and that's not that he's like against that, but it's just like that's not the stuff he's writing, and whereas like I kind of write to what I love about the way Comeback Kid sounds. So a lot of the stuff that I write will be, sort of these octave chord, skate punk influenced, melodic hardcore songs, similar to older Comeback Kid. And then the stuff that Jeremy writes is just kind of like, it's like exactly what it should be. Like, like there's certain chordings and there's certain, aspects to the way Jeremy writes that like really defines Comeback Kid's sound.
Yeah.
And when Jeremy sends a demo, there might be like some stuff that's like kind of different or you didn't expect, but then there's always going to be this one part or this certain chord or something where you're just like, oh, okay, yep, it's a Comeback Kid song, So and the stuff that Jeremy sent so far is like really great. So I feel like pretty darn confident going into it this time. And I like the way that we're going about this. Like, I think it's going to be cool to have like 10 days to like sort of like feel some stuff out and like have a space and an opportunity where, if we're working on something, Andrew can just stand up and we can hit record and he can record a vocal idea, whether it's gibberish or if it's like something that's super focused and inspired at that moment. At least we'll be able to like put it to tape or, record it on a demo right there and like be able to sit on it and sort of process that for a little time before we like commit to it. Whereas like, I think like, with Outsider, there was vocal ideas and there was sort of like vibes that Andrew had that he wanted to go like work towards. But this is, in my experience with Comeback Kid, this will be the first time where we're going to actually like put in a little more legwork before we hit the studio, which I think will be beneficial.
Yeah. Just to talk about Jeremy, like there's been a lot of different members in the band Comeback Kid over the years, and I think it's been a huge asset to Comeback Kid to have, a guy like Jeremy who's been there from the start and just a consistent member, and so that makes me really excited to hear those songs and just how it comes together. I mean, yeah, Comeback Kid's one of my all-time favorite bands, and I don't think you guys can do any wrong, so I'm really excited for that. What are some of your favorite moments with Comeback Kid that you've had so far?
Oh man, there's honestly,
I'm sure there's been a lot.
There's so many like amazing like festivals, especially in Europe, that we get to play where we're playing to like 30,000 people, between Blue Oyster Cult and like some other band or something weird, in Europe we really get the opportunity to do these cool festivals, that like Limp Bizkit or like Alice in Chains are playing and like that kind of cool stuff. And one thing that is really cool with Comeback Kid is, you know, they do get to play some of these more like punk shows that like, you know, Misery Signals would never play or something. And that like, that's sort of like an outlet for me to do that stuff that like, you know, I've always wanted to do since I was a kid. So yeah, we've had like some really cool opportunities to do that sort of stuff. I mean, the one tour that we were supposed to do this year that I was looking forward to so much was this Punk and Drublic tour, which is like a Fat Mike curated tour where he kind of like picks the bands for it. And it was like this tour in Europe that was going to be NoFX and Pennywise and who else was on it? Frank Turner, Face to Face, which is like one of my favorite bands ever, you know, and Comeback Kid got in the mix somehow, which is just cool. Like we've had these like weird sort of like run-ins with Fat Mike over the last couple of years where, you know, we'll play a festival with NoFX or something. And we have like mutual friends or, you know, we have a couple drinks with their crew guys or something. And it just feels like we've gotten, you know, we're on their radar a little bit. And that's like a super cool thing for me. Like NoFX is a band that I've loved since I was a kid. So it's like, you know, to be able to do a tour like that, you know, was going to be like a, you know, a life defining moment for me. And then, you know, the tour got postponed because of COVID, but it's rescheduled for next year. And I mean, it seems a little early in the year and I'm trying not to, you know, hold my breath, but like, I'm obviously like really, really hopeful it'll still happen.
Yeah, that's got to be so disappointing. I mean, I know there's lots of disappointments in this season, but something like that is, I mean, how do you not kind of let that get to you? But yeah, hopefully, really hoping that will happen, and because that would be an amazing experience. So I have one. So we're going to transition talking about some of the albums that influenced you. But first, I have a fan question for you, if that's allowed. And I really liked this question. So it says he'd be curious which album you've been a part of that you feel that you've identified the deepest with. Like which project do you feel represents him musically the best? He also goes to say that you are a pop punk, hardcore, metal unicorn. Everything you do is amazing.
Well, thank you. That's a really cool compliment. Yeah, that's kind of a hard question. I mean, I think like anything I've been involved with Comeback Kid, there's moments on each record where I feel like, you know, I feel like it's really, it's like really putting myself into a song or kind of like defining myself. But I mean, I think like, man, that's such a hard question. You know, for me, doing Die Knowing an Outsider were very important records for me. Obviously doing Malice, you know, which we talked about, was like a pretty important thing, especially that at that age for me. But I mean, Ultraviolet too, you know, I'm really, really, really proud of Ultraviolet. It's something that we all put a lot of hard work into. And yeah, man, I don't know. That's such a hard question. And especially like being a musician, because like, you know, you put so much into something, you write it, you record it, you release it. But being like a musician, like I always want to do more. I still feel like I still haven't got it all out yet. You know, like I still feel like there's more songs to write and there's more, just more feeling to capture and put out there. So I don't know. Hard question. I hope that kind of fields the answer, but
yeah,
I'm pretty proud of everything we've done with both bands.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree with that. When I read that question, I was like, oh, that is a cool question. But when you've been a part of so many records for so many years, you know, but yeah, you know, sometimes there are musicians that's just like, you know, I really connected with this specific one, even though I love everything I've done. And so, yeah. So we're going to, so go ahead.
I will say one thing that we just did that was really cool. And I assume by the time this podcast comes out, it will have been released. But so shortly after Chai Pig passed in July, we were talking about SNFU, like in group text with the band and stuff. And we're like, yo, we should just like record an SNFU cover and release it. So we recorded an SNFU cover.
Awesome.
Like over the last couple of weeks, and it's mixed, it's finished. Like I think we're going to release it on Monday. But yeah, so that was like a really cool thing to do, just because it's like, you know, growing up in Canada, SNFU was like obviously like a huge influence to us as like kids playing punk music, and you know, seeing SNFU shows when we were younger, where it's like, you know, some of the first shows we probably ever went to. You know, that band is just like so important, and I feel like kind of like underrated. But you know, so we ended up recording Reality is a Ride on the Bus, which for people like around our age, you know, who would have had Punkorama Volume 1.
Yeah.
You know, that song's on there, and it's just such a like such a cool, legendary, you know, song of that era. So yeah, we tracked that and recorded it, and should be out. Like I said, I think should be coming out on Monday or something.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, looking forward to that.
So that was a cool thing to be a part of.
Yeah. So when you sent this list of influential albums, the last thing you said on it was, "Man, bands used to make good records." What's your thought behind that? Do you feel like as music has shifted? I mean, there's been so much that has shifted over the 20 plus years since a lot of these favorite albums of yours came out. Do you feel like that's like impossible for bands to make albums that are still going to have such lasting value, or what was your thought? Just like, oh man, there's just so many good albums from that era.
I think of that era, because I definitely by no means like, I don't want it to be misinterpreted as those bands aren't making good records now, because they are. I mean, like, yeah, you know, a band like Rancid put out Troublemaker a few years ago, and that record's awesome. And,
the newest Face to Face, so good, man.
Yeah, I mean, Protection was like, in my mind, is like one of the best Face to Face records.
Yeah,
like that record's awesome, and I mean, that's like a newer record, you know. I can't, like, it pains me to say it, and I don't think anyone in Green Day will ever hear this, but if you did, I don't like your new records, and I'm mad at you guys for writing such terrible music. But you know, I love old Green Day records, and I think those are some of the best. Like, I don't even want to call them pop punk records, because when people say pop punk, they talk about like Mr. Chunk, or like Wonder Years or something, like those like newer like pop punk bands, like Newfound Glory or something. And like, I don't know, like, yeah, sure, those bands are pop punk bands, and like some of those bands are great. I'm not like hating on the genre, but like, that's not pop punk to me, you know. Like bands like Green Day, you know, are like real pop punk bands to me. Anyway.
Yeah, so with their album Insomniac, why this one? What was it about this one that stands out or has more longevity than their other records?
I mean, I get some flack for it, because I think like some people are like, well, Green Day's Dookie is obviously like the record for that band. And I mean, yeah, there's like amazing songs on Dookie, and it's a great record, and it was like my first introduction to Green Day. But I just think Insomniac's like a cooler record. I think the songs are better. I think there's like a darker element to the band that like only exists on that record, you know. Like, I think like as pissed off and as like negative as Green Day could ever be, I think is on that record, and I think that's cool. I think that's like sort of like the pinnacle, or like the highest point of like, you know, where like Billy Joe's lyrics are so like cynical and like so like at times can be like self-deprecating, or like, but like in this like cool, relatable way, where he's not being like, oh, like, I'm a loser, go kill yourself, but he's being like, I'm kind of like a shithead, and these are my problems, and like these are like so like relatable to people, and like everybody's, you know, got like a side to them that like isn't perfect, you know. I just think it's such a cool record, and like just like the songs themselves, like the progressions are awesome, the production's cool, like it's in my mind, it's like definitely the best Green Day record. Yeah, just like, dude, like even just like the energy, like in the first track right off the gate, the little drum intro, and like just the build, and yeah, it's just such an awesome record. And for me, like being into Dookie, you know, was like such a cool record. And, you know, around that time, like 94, 95, like Green Day was my favorite band. And to have them release a record following Dookie that was like as good, and in my opinion, like better, it's like, whoa, yeah, it's like so cool, you know. And to this day, like, man, I've listened to Insomniac without fail at least once a week. Like I'll just go back to that record just because it like still resonates with me. It's still important, and I still like love every aspect of it. I don't think there's a bad song on it, which is like hard to say, with a lot of records. There's not a track that I would skip. I just love that record. Yeah.
I can still remember hearing it for the first time too. My brother had borrowed it from a friend, and like you said, to this day, it's still one that can get put on any time, and it's just as good. What would be the last Green Day album that you really loved?
Like unfortunately, I would say that's the last one I really loved. I didn't like Nimrod. Still has some of that energy, and it still has some of those songs, but I feel like that's where they started to, like, for better or worse, like Nimrod, they started to sort of like branch out and try and do some things differently musically, and I don't think that's like a bad thing. I don't like blame them for wanting to change their sound, and I think that comes along with success, and there's probably like outside contributing factors, and they're writing songs in studios with different producers and doing all sorts of stuff, and I get it. That happens. That's cool. Like, but for me, that's kind of like where they fell off. There's still some stuff on Nimrod and Warning that I enjoy. But by the, like, Warning is just like such a strange record. Like, if you were a fan of Dookie and Insomniac, by the time you get to Warning, you're like, okay, what's going on here? It's kind of taking a weird turn. And then, so I mean, there's songs on Nimrod I enjoy. There's songs on Warning that I enjoy, but then they just kind of like fell off for me. And even like when American Idiot came out, like the song American Idiot, I think is a cool song. It's as most people know, it's pretty much a Dillinger 4 ripoff, but played a little faster, and it's a cool Green Day song. But outside of that, like, there's not a lot of songs on American Idiot that I liked. And then the 21st Century Breakdown or whatever, like, that record was just, they're straightening their hair and wearing pink ties and 21 guns or whatever. It's just like, I'm like, oh man, what happened?
Do you think they could have kept up their sound? Or, I mean, obviously I don't think had they just stayed in that sound, they would have gained the exposure, because a lot of the songs off of American Idiot and 21st Breakdown, definitely appealed more to, radio and rock, and so they wouldn't have gotten nearly as big. But do you think, they could have still kept maybe some more of that edge and aggression in there, or was that kind of too far gone by that point?
Yeah, maybe they could have. Maybe they could have been a band that's the size of NoFX or Pennywise or one of those bands, and would that still give them a good life? Probably. I would assume so. They wouldn't have had the commercial success that they've had. I don't know, but I don't think it's that, like, I don't necessarily think they were motivated by money or fame. I think they just grew as musicians and were just writing the music that they wanted to write, which just unfortunately doesn't appeal to me,
Yeah, and that's, I guess, just part of it being a band, right? You can't please everyone. You got to do what makes you happy, and not everybody just wants to play that kind of music, for 20 plus years. So,
and I mean, like, you hear like the newest Green Day record, or like the single, the I don't know, the whatever it was called. With it, almost just sounds like a garage rock thing, which just sounds like they did that Foxborough Hot Tubs or whatever it was called, Fox something Hot Tubs. Do you know about that record?
No.
So they had like a side band, like kind of like mid 2000s, that was just kind of like more of like a lo-fi garage punk band, but it's all the guys in Green Day.
Okay, I think I heard about that. I don't remember any of the songs.
I think it's called Foxborough Hot Tubs or something like that. But anyway, that record just sounds like the record that Green Day just put out, where it's like these like falsetto sung, lo-fi sounding garage tones. Like, I don't know, it's just what they're into, but it's not what I'm into.
Yeah,
and it's not what I want to hear from Green Day.
Well, at least they have those albums that you can go back to and relive those glory days. So I guess that's all you can take. So the next one was Rancid's and Out Come the Wolves. So this is an album for me that I like totally slept on. I mean, I've knew of Rancid, kind of since a teenager, but for whatever reason, I just didn't really listen to them, and it hasn't even been into the last couple of years that I've really got into this album. I was listening to it again yesterday and was just kind of like kicking myself that I missed it back in its prime. I mean, it's still great now, but yeah, such a great record. And after 25 years, it still sounds awesome. The songs are really good. It's easy to listen to. I listened to a few of their albums after this one and didn't like them as much. So I'm not really sure kind of about those progressions. But what was it about this album that was so life-changing for you?
Again, it's just one of the, like, as we spoke about earlier, like a lot of bands have like one record that kind of like defines their career. And I just feel like that's the record for them. So like I only know so much, Rancid history, but it's like, when they did Self-Titled, they recorded it as a 3-piece, but they had already sort of recruited Lars as the fourth member. And if I am remembering the Rancid history correctly, they had given Lars the opportunity to play on Self-Titled, but he was like, no, like, you guys have this record written, let me earn my sort of keep in the band. And so when they did Let's Go, that's sort of the first record that Lars was super involved with. And that record is like dense. There's like 23 songs on it or something.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But that's sort of like the first kind of taste you get of them as being like who the band was at that time, and there's some like really great songs on Let's Go that are awesome, but it's like, it's all kind of like the same tempoed stuff. It's all like, just kind of like, it's just this dense, 23 track like punk record. And Let's Go is still like a hugely important record for me. The same way that Dookie is like really important for me with Green Day, Let's Go is equally as important to me as Out Come the Wolves, but I just think Out Come the Wolves is a better record. And I think it's just like them, kind of coming into their own, like writing just different songs. Like one thing, like I listened to a Rancid podcast where they were talking about writing Out Come the Wolves. And one thing I think is cool with that band, because they kind of dabble in, doing like some punk ska reggae stuff, is like each time they would write a song, they'd like play it as a punk song. And then they'd be like, well, what's the song like if we play it as like a down tempo, like reggae song, or like, let's try it as like a upbeat ska song, like with every song they write. And I mean, I don't know if they do this with every song, but the way they were talking about writing Out Come the Wolves is that they would sort of like trial and error each song with like sort of like this different identity, which I think is like a really cool thing, like to be like, well, this chorus is great whether we play it in a ska song or a punk song or whatever. But I just think that shows like with Out Come the Wolves, like there's so much like variety. There's songs that are like really, just straightforward, like 3-chord punk Rancid songs. And then there's, some ska tracks, like Old Friend is probably my favorite song on that record, and it's a ska song. And like, what is the song called? Little Sam is Punk Rocker. Like just starting that song and just Lars and a guitar, like there's just like such cool stuff. And like the lyrics on the record are really cool. Like there's so much cool like imagery and like storytelling. Like, every song has this way of just like putting you in the middle of the song as it's happening. Like it's just such a cool record overall. And like, I just think as far as like punk records go, like being a person of our age, we can't talk about like, like the feeling of hearing a Black Flag record in the 80s, or like, hearing Minor Threat when it was like this thing that was like cool and different happening, and like people who are around in that era might look at like a Rancid record and be like, oh, it's poser stuff or whatever, but like for me, it's just like, I guess it's just such a well-written record, and like the music and the songs are great. And then on top of that, like I just said, like the lyrics are just so like cool, and like they're just so good at like bringing you, like I said, into like this spot, and like it's like you could be there, you know what I mean, when you listen to those songs.
Yeah, I agree with all that, and I already look forward to going back and listening to it again, even though just listened to it yesterday, because there's just so many songs, and it's like, oh man, it just flows so well, and just makes you want to go back and listen. So the third one is the self-titled From Face to Face, which was a very influential one for me. I can still remember. I think I bought this one from a pawn shop in the little town I
Cool.
was in. I originally had gotten an EP of theirs and then their live albums. So those were the ones that I had. So I had probably heard some of the songs from Self-Titled because I think there was some on the live album. So I heard that one before this. But yeah, this is another one of those albums that just stands up. You know, I still put it on, still sounds amazing, and just one of those albums that's hard to beat.
Yeah, dude. I mean, just to like talk about Face to Face for a minute. I mean, like they're one of the first bands for me that like, and I use this term like loosely because I know people would be like, "What are you talking about?" But like, they have like an emo vibe, I guess. Like, there's just something about like the feeling of Face to Face. Again, like the progressions they choose and like Trevor's voice, and again, like his lyrics are just like they're so personal, but they're so broad. Like, I just feel like anybody can listen to a Face to Face song and like relate to it. You know what I mean? They can find something in those lyrics that like makes that band important to them. You know, like even like a person like my sister who's not like a big punk music fan. You know, like she loves like Big Choice. Like she loves that record, and it's like there's just something about it. You know, the lyrics and the music that just create this full package of, you know, emotion and feeling that I think people latch onto. But again, so, you know, like for me, Big Choice was the first Face to Face record I had. From that, I got Don't Turn Away. So I was already a fan of the band before Self-Titled came out. And again, you know, like I've read a lot of stuff online and watched interviews and stuff about Face to Face, and like, you know, they had just like, I think they had really like perfected like the sound of the band when by the time they hit the studio to record Self-Titled. And I think it's like the perfect Face to Face record. There's not a bad song on it. Like, dude, you know, them being on a major label or whatever for that record, for that first song to be like this, that like driving intro with the bass and the toms, and then everything comes in, and it's just the classic Face to Face, like one chord being held over a progression that's moving around. Like, it's just awesome. And then again, like, you know, Trevor's vocals and the lyrics are just like so awesome, man. And again, like especially as like a teenager, and even as an adult, man, like I the other day that song Resignation came on when I was out for a walk, and it's like the lyrics, like whatever Trevor was going through when he wrote that song, you know, like I don't know the exact story behind those lyrics, but like I can listen to it and I can just like relate to it, and it's just super important to me, like as a record. And like there's something also very cool about Face to Face at that time where like I don't know, like aesthetically I think they had like a cool vibe going on. Like, you know, Trevor Keith was like very clean cut but like tattooed, and they just have like a thing about them at that point that I think is like so cool. And then, you know, circling forward, which we were talking about, like, you know, they have a lot of records between Self-Titled and Protection, but like, you know, Protection is, to me, it's like almost like part 2 of Self-Titled. Like the production's a little different, but it's like the songwriting seems like similar to me, and like the vibe, like, but yeah, anyway, so Self-Titled is just like an awesome record. And I can remember getting that album, and I had to go on like a family trip. My sister went to boarding school in Wilcox outside Regina.
Okay. Yeah.
So when I was like a teenager, sometimes we'd like go out there to visit her or whatever. And I remember like kind of just being bored whenever I'd have to go out there. So I'd bring my skateboard and my Discman, and I had just gotten that record. And I remember just like kind of like skating in circles in front of the house we were staying at and listening to that record. And just to this day, I still have that memory. There's nothing like profoundly life-changing about that moment, but it's a very fond memory I have of that record, I guess.
Yeah. For me, I feel like even when I got that, I'm not sure how old I would have been, but I could just sense, you know, there was a bit more depth to that band, you know, a bit more maturity, you know, even, you know, lyrically compared to a lot of the bands I was listening to then. You know, they weren't like singing about girls or high school, and you know, there was just something a bit different about them. And the songs really held up. And you mentioned maybe towards the emo side. I don't know if I would have picked up on that as much, but I definitely noticed, they don't have the same, speed as a lot of, the more skate punk bands or the punk bands I was listening to at that time. And which I liked about them. And again, it was just something, it was still upbeat enough to keep me intrigued and interested, but just a depth and kind of warmth to it that I still feel about it. So yeah, a great choice on that one. So
it's like again, like they're one of my all-time favorite bands for sure. And again, like this thing that was supposed to happen this year that got canceled, Face to Face was on that tour as well. And Comeback Kid was going to do, like, we were doing all our off dates between the festival shows with Face to Face. So we're supposed to do like a bunch of club shows with them. So I was just like, man, I'm going to see Face to Face like 20 times this year. It's going to be crazy. And it's like, it's one of those things too. Like, like I go to like, we saw Face to Face last September. They played in Vancouver. And man, like still, like when I see that band live, like I don't pit. I'm not like in the mosh pit. I'm not at the barricade. Like losing my mind, but man, like Face to Face, when I see him live, like, I'm standing at the back of the venue and I'm like bopping up and down and I'm singing every word in it. Like, I'm not the kind of guy that goes to a show and like shouts loudly or like sings along, but like when I go to see Face to Face, I do. Like, I can't control it. I just get super excited and like I love that band.
Yeah, they're one of those bands that I hope keeps going and keeps releasing stuff as long as they can. Especially with their last album, they definitely lost me on a few of those ones in between, but Protection, I'm back 100% and can't wait to see if and when they do something else. So
yeah,
awesome,
absolutely, me too.
But well, dude, this has been so much fun. Thanks for sharing just your experience with different bands, and I love just getting to hear stories about joining bands and writing and just everything that goes into music. And I love that you're still so much a part of it, and you're such a talented guy. So I love that you still get to do this for a living. So keep doing it for the rest of us.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and it's been a lot of fun to talk to you. And thanks for having the interest. I love talking about this sort of stuff. So it's been a lot of fun for sure.
Hey, you. Anything happens to my daughter, I got a 45 and a shovel. I doubt anybody would miss you.